Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, this is your brother Isa Ma. I get asked this question a lot. What's it like to be a Muslim in China? So in this video, inshallah, I'm going to talk about some of my thoughts and experiences as a Muslim in China. First, I think we need to understand that إِنَّ الْأَرْضِ لِلَّهِ يُرِثُهَا مَن يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ. The entire ground, the entire earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He lets whoever He wishes among His slaves to inherit it. And the borders and the countries, the nation states, they are a artificial construct, and it changes over time historically. So I think we shouldn't overemphasize the fact that you are in this country or I'm in that country. We have to constantly remember that we are all upon the earth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then based on that, furthermore, we need to understand that the entire earth is a testing place, right? We know that our life in this dunya is a test. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً وَإِلَيْنَا تُرْجَعُونَ. We test you with good and bad, whatever you perceive to be good and bad, and to us you shall return. So, no matter where you are, no matter which country you are in, there will be tests, because that's the nature of this world. That's the purpose of this earth. So, tests come in different forms and different intensities. But wherever you are, there will be tests. There's no place that is perfectly safe and carefree and comfortable for Muslims, and there's no place that's definitely impossible to live for Muslims, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of all situations and all circumstances, and whenever He decrees for Muslims to live in a land, there will be tests, but there will also be blessings, and oftentimes these things are side by side, tests and blessings. There are different combinations, but I believe in every land, in every country, in every society, you will find tests and blessings, both of them. So, I remember once I was in America and I was complaining to an Egyptian friend about all the difficulties and trials and tribulations and restrictions and problems for Muslims in China. And after listening to my whole story, he said, why do you think it's better in Egypt? He told me that there are scholars who have been imprisoned in Egypt. He told me that there are also people in Egypt who don't really care about religion at all. They live a very secular life. And he told me that certain religious practices are also restricted by the government, although it's a Muslim country, right? And we may think of American Muslims as very free. However, I've heard from Sheikh Omar Hussein that, American Muslims also have struggles. For example, in terms of their political participation and position, the American Muslims are oftentimes stuck somewhere between the left and the right. Both the leftist and the right wing don't welcome the Muslims that much. So that's also a struggle. And I've been to 12 countries. I've met people from many different countries. And I've realized that, there's no perfect place because the nature of this world is a test. So we shouldn't really complain about where we are born, where we grew up, where we are living, because, many of these things, or actually all of these things are qadarullah, is the what's the word? It's a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, we should ask ourselves, in such circumstances, in the place that we are in, what should we do to score a high mark in this test, right? In my case, as a Muslim in China, with the particular circumstances, the trials and tribulations on one hand, but also the blessings on the other hand, what should I do? How should I act as a Muslim in order to have a good result in my record, and to have more good deeds on my scale in the hereafter. So that's what we should think about. So these are some general discussions about my feelings about different countries and different societies for Muslims, the general idea is that wherever you are, it's a test. So you shouldn't really complain about your surroundings, but you should focus on how to maximize your success in terms of religion and spirituality in that place. And then now, I want to talk about some specific aspects of the life of a Muslim in China. You're pretty familiar with a lot of negative things. Some of them are true and some of them not. But the media has that powerful ability to paint and to overgeneralize. And Malcolm X said that the media is the most powerful machinery in the world. It can make the innocent guilty and make the guilty innocent. So in this time and age, it's really hard to give people a clear idea about a particular social environment, because the media gives people such disorienting misconceptions, misperceptions, and overgeneralizations. So despite whatever negative impressions you may have about China, I've mentioned in some of my previous videos that Muslims have been in this country for over 1,000 years. Actually, China is one of the countries that Islam arrived at first, right? There were Muslims in China before India and before Indonesia, for example. So Chinese Muslims have been here for a long time. Different dynasties, one took over another, and Muslims have always been here. So in modern China, I would say that the Chinese Muslims are very introverted. Actually, throughout history, we have been very introverted. So we're not so good at da'wah, communicating our deen to non-believers in this society. And that has a lot to do with the cultural environment. Chinese people in general are quite introverted. We're not good at telling others about our deep, spiritual feelings and associations. So the Chinese Muslims, they are internally oriented, right? When we talk about religion and Islam, it's almost as if it's limited to the certain ethnic groups, the 10 ethnic groups in China that believe in Islam. And it's rare to see interfaith dialogues, because faith in China is not really an emphasized aspect of life. Most Chinese people are more concerned with the material life, how to live a comfortable life, career, salary, and food. So faith is more of a unfamiliar topic to most Chinese people, and that's why we don't really have many interfaith dialogues. We don't really have a lot of public da'wah. Although there are new Muslims, right, reverts every now and then. There are Han Muslims, Tibetan Muslims, Mongol Muslims in China as well, but they are rather few. Most Muslims are Muslims because of their families, because of their ethnic group. So that's one thing about Chinese Muslims. We're very introverted. And another thing about Chinese Muslims living in China is that we have very successfully become a part of this idea of the Chinese nation, right? In many Western countries, for example, French Muslims or American Muslims, they can be there for a few generations, but the society might still alienate them and see them as foreign and see them as latecomers, people who came to this land as either immigrants or refugees or whatever. There's always this sense of division that you are different from us. But the Chinese Muslims, some of the Chinese Muslims, the ethnic groups that have very well integrated into the Chinese society and culture, no Chinese people would think of them as foreign. Even if they have Islamophobia, even if they have questions and doubts about Islam, they would very naturally think that these people are Chinese. There's no question about it. So this is something quite special, I think, about Chinese Muslims. And I've talked about this in some of my talks regarding the history of Chinese Muslims. So you can refer to those as well. And, are there hardships and challenges and difficulties in religious practices? Sure, there are some. For example, I think it's really hard to have a offline religious activity outside of places of worship, right? For example, if I want to have a conference or some kind of a workshop about Islam in a cafe, probably the law enforcers will intervene and prevent it from happening, because they would regard that as illegal religious activity, because according to the rules and regulations here, legal religious activity has to take place in religious sites, like in the church and in the masjid and temple, whatever. So in that regard, there are some restrictions and hardships and problems. And publications, again, is the same thing. But this is also, it changes over time. It depends on the leadership, right? So some historians have said that the Chinese people's political ideology is waiting for a good leader. Like, that's our political ideology, waiting for a good emperor. And so it goes in cycles. It depends on the mentality and the philosophy of the leader. If the leader is more, open-minded and more lenient upon religion, then there will be more freedom. For example, about I think a decade ago, there was a period of time when religions were flourishing, all religions in China, and there were a lot of publications and religious institutions, etc. But in recent years, due to the change of leadership and the new mentality and philosophy brought in by the new leadership, now it's another era, so to speak, that it's more restricted, and publications are under heavy supervision, and it's really hard to publish religious books, and it's hard to run religious schools. Many schools have been closed, and religious education is now being asked to be formalized and controlled and regulated by the authority. But this is, again, if you take a historic perspective, if you look at it, keeping in mind the other eras and the other circumstances that have existed before, you would know that this is not a constant situation. This is rather a changing, one of the changing episodes in Chinese history. But the Chinese people, the Chinese Muslims, over 1,000 years, they have developed this kind of adaptive wisdom. They can look at the environment and figure out the best way to survive, right? So in a way, the Chinese Muslims, they focus more on survival than outgoing development. And that's why, relating to my previous point, we're not so keen on da'wah, because it's more about survival. It's more about passing on this faith to our next generation, especially within the household, within our families. So they have developed this kind of adaptation strategy. So whatever the environment presents, we'll see how to better react to that. So it's a little bit of a passive approach, you can say, but it's created by the special social environment and the historic circumstances. So that's another thing about Chinese Muslims. We are a little more passive. But that doesn't mean that the Chinese Muslims are not passionate about Islam. Actually, I've met many Chinese Muslims. They're very passionate about Islam. And no matter what area or field they're in, they always want to do something and contribute to the development of the deen in this country. The businessmen are very generous to donate money to build masajid, schools, and to help with publications and scholars. And one thing that Chinese Muslims do very well, and perhaps exceptionally well comparing to Muslims in other countries, is that they are very willing to support religious personnel, like clergy or imams, du'at, teachers, etc. I've heard that in Egypt there are some great scholars, the shuyukh, the great scholars, they would have to drive a cab, a taxi, to earn money, or to have, some kind of a side business, because, they're not really financially stable just by, they may not even have income from their religious service. They may have a great halaqah, people are, competing to listen to their knowledge, but they may not have a very stable financial income from that, so they need another source of income, and this happens in other Muslim countries too. But in China, people are very willing and very aware of the financial needs of clergy and religious personnel, so they're very eager to help them, and that's why you would see that the Chinese imams, oftentimes they can focus on their religious work, on preparing their khutbah and teaching their students, and managing community affairs, and most of the times these people would not have to worry about finances. They're quite well supported by the community. So I've talked about many things about being a Muslim in China, and I guess your reaction or conclusion would be it's no different. Like, you've talked about so much, but it's nothing spicy, there's nothing special, there's nothing that really stands out. But that's exactly my point. I mentioned in the beginning that Inna al-ardi lillah, the entire earth belongs to Allah. So eventually, wherever you are, whichever country you are in the mulk of Allah, you're in the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's all about how you act, right? The environment is only the stage, but we are the actors. We are the ones that have to create the show, so to speak, or the actions. So if you feel that like it's no different and there's nothing special and there's nothing spicy, that's true. So to be a Muslim in China is not that different from to be a Muslim in any other country. And I think the Chinese Muslims understand this, right? So they're content with whatever circumstances they are presented with, and they focus on doing their best. They focus on, living a meaningful life, and they focus on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't focus on changing what cannot be changed that much. There are things that are really beyond human capacity, and we have to be humble enough to acknowledge that. Although, here there is actually a very strong contrast between Western tradition and the Oriental, the Eastern tradition. The Western tradition is more revolutionary, more reformative, right? They want to change things over and over and over and over. And of course, there are merits to that kind of philosophy. But the Eastern tradition, and not only China, if you look at Japan and Korea and some of the other Eastern countries, you would see that the Eastern mentality is a little bit more reserved, right? A little bit more conservative, you can say. We look at how to preserve the good things and not always to demolish existing structure. And there are merits to that, and of course shortcomings to that as well. But I think the Chinese Muslims have absorbed some of the tradition, in that they are also more focused on preserving and conserving rather than changing and demolishing and breaking and building new things. So it's a long video. I talked a lot, but I don't know what key takeaways there are in this video. But I think for people who are more sophisticated, maybe this video can help them realize that the Chinese Muslims are not living in hell. Some people think like that. Real tragedy is only in the hereafter. In this world, no hardship is end of the world. No difficulty is too overwhelming to overcome. In this word, wherever you are, we have the same mission to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the same responsibilities as a Muslim. We have the same fara'id, the compulsory acts and commands. And we have the same model to follow, the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And he actually went through many different scenarios, right? Throughout his seerah, there was a time when he lived in a non-Muslim majority society in Mecca. So that's a model as well. And for Muslims in China, and that's a very similar and a very referable model. So you shouldn't think of Muslims in China as living in a weird scenario, because it's a scenario that existed in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So he went through these different scenarios in order to leave a legacy, so that no matter where later Muslims are, they have something to look at, they have something to refer to, right? So we have the same model to follow, and we have the same objective in life, we have the same ultimate pursuit and goal. So we're not that different. And this is something that, no matter I give a talk in China or India, I keep telling people that, look, we should focus more on the commonalities instead of the differences. Sometimes it's important to know the differences, لِتَعَرَفُوا, so that you can know each other. But sometimes it's important to know the commonalities, to know that we are all the same in certain things, and that creates unity, and that creates brotherhood, and that creates a sense of calmness, right? That creates a sense of tranquility, that look, it's all good, it's all in control, it's all not worthy of so many worries and fears and sadness. It's all good. لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Don't be sad. Allah is with us. So, don't over sympathize your Chinese Muslim brothers and sisters. We're not we're not living in that terrible a situation as some of you may presume, right? And of course, we make dua for Muslims in all over the world, wherever they are. But at the same time, we should spend more time doing things rather than thinking things. And especially not on thinking about things beyond our control and things that don't concern us. This is one thing that I find to be very common among Muslims on the internet. They tend to concern themselves with things that don't concern them. Right? It's a big problem. So as a Muslim who's living in China right now, who's born and raised in China, but who's been to many different places and witnessed different societies, I would say that to be a Muslim in China is, if I were to use one adjective to describe it, normal. To be a Muslim in China is normal. And this perhaps would be a very boring answer to the people watching this video who clicked on the video in hope of something very extreme, right? Something very explosive. But sorry, that's just how I feel, and that's how most of the Chinese Muslims I've met feel, that it's normal in China. We have our, worries and fears, but we have our hopes and positivities. It's just ni'mah and blessing and trial, just as any other society. So alhamdulillah, this word is just a trip, a short trip, and we are just passing by. There's nothing so eternally fearsome about it. We're going to leave it very soon. So I hope we can all have that attitude, which is a prophetic attitude, right? We are just travelers in this world. So don't emphasize too much on the geography or the polity that Muslims are in. We understand that it's just dunya, ma hiya illa dunya, and our home, our real home, is in the hereafter, darul akhirah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us content Muslims who submit to Him alone, Azza wa Jal, and to focus on our task, our objective, our ultimate purpose, and to act more than we speak, and to be successful in the real sense in the hereafter, and to return to our home safely and happily in Jannah, inshallah. Thank you for watching this video. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.